Yo, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of the It's Needed podcast, where we discuss real issues involving law enforcement and the community. It's your boy Ryan Tillman, founder of Breaking Barriers United, and I'm joined today by the light-skinned wonder himself, Mr. Oh No, it's the Popo. What's up, Brody?
Hey, I just downed some coffee, so y'all got hyper AJ today. You're welcome.
Oh man, took one to the head. We're joined as always by the savage himself, Mr. Billy. What's going on, Billy?
I had some coffee as well, but I'm still trying to catch up on that hyperness, man.
Dang,
Billy
shoot.
don't need coffee. Billy just wake up energetic.
Yeah,
Just
Billy-
the type pop out the bed, ready to take on the
Billy
world.
wake up at 110, bro. He don't play no games.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
And then we're also joined. So I had the privilege last week of flying to Dallas on Wednesday to go speak at an event called Heal America Tour, and the whole premise behind it was, how can we, heal our country, and it was put on by Bishop Omar Jawar in Dallas, Texas, and phenomenal dude. And when I say he assembled like some players there, I felt like I was like the lowest man on the totem pole in the building, because it was a phenomenal event. And I had the pleasure of meeting our podcast guest today, Mr. Leon Ford, which, man, this brother right here, when I tell you, it was dope, man. And you guys will hear a little bit more here in a little bit, but being able to sit across this brother and in light of what our country is going through and the turmoil we're going through, was a measure of hope in and of itself. So Leon, it is a pleasure to have you on, my brother. Thank you for such a show notice, because I asked my man yesterday, I was like, hey, just like typical black folks, bro. I was like, hey man, hey man, you could you be on? But yeah, we gotta do it tomorrow. So
Man, thank you for the invite, man, and for sharing your platform. And we got work to do, man. And I love the intentionality behind us connecting and how we, continue to make sure that we've been in contact. So, like, there's been other connections and things that we're working on already. So I'm excited, bro.
Without a doubt, man. Without a doubt. And I also got the email today from our other connect, man, for when we're gonna get on. So, but hey, so any current events, real quick, fellas? I mean, the last time we were on, I don't know if there was anything major that's happened since it. We were on last Monday, Leon, and shout out to our last few guests, man. We've had some phenomenal guests, from Artie and his sentence, lifetime sentence he got, to Henry Gracie. If you're not following those guys on Instagram or anything like that, you need to be. Been some phenomenal guests, and so, but a lot is still going on, man. I mean, I've had to turn off the news. I've had to turn off social media in some aspects, just because you just get so inundated with all this negativity. And oh man, it's difficult, man. Like it really will kill your joy if you just get inundated with that. I mean, am I just saying it, or do y'all feel the same way?
No, absolutely.
I feel the same way, bro. I'm very intentional about how much I consume. And I keep myself aware of what's going on, but I don't like because you can get lost in that negativity real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt, man. What about you, A?
Absolutely. My man Ryan already knows this, but your boy was kicked off Facebook for no reason. Hey, literally no reason. Like, I tried to log in the other day and they were like, yeah, your account gone. But I wasn't even mad. I was like, it is what it is. Like, at least I don't gotta see this negativity all day. So I've been feeling great the past couple days, man.
So they kicked you off like completely, bro?
Bro, I think they kicked me off because I changed my name on like my personal account, just because I didn't want folks like typing my name in and trying to find me. But I mean, everybody does that, right? So I don't know. But Facebook is sneaky, man. How they did it is they deleted my personal account. Therefore, I can't access the Oh No, it's the Popo account, post or view anything. So that account is still up and running, but no one is. It's like a plane with no pilot. It's just coasting.
Are you serious?
Yeah, man. So I ain't even mad about it though.
Bro, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy. I don't know what just happened. What just popped up on there, Billy? Oh, there it is. Yeah. So, well, I mean, that's what do you call it? They what call Uncle Sam or Big Brother? Big Brother at his finest, right there, bro.
That's Big Brother for sure, for sure. So it is what it is. I still got IG rocking. So
Hey, I'm not gonna lie though. When you told me they deleted your account, I'm not gonna lie. I looked through my account and started walking a little bit more gingerly. I was like, "Hey, we are we good over here?
Hey,
don't
the
delete me."
Facebook police. Hey, Facebook police ain't playing no games.
Hey, I'm
man.
like, "Don't
No,
delete me. We ain't got the blue check. Give me the blue check first, then y'all can delete me."
man.
Oh man. So hey, I don't want to keep the Leon's story from you guys because again, he's another phenomenal man doing some phenomenal things. But I want to get into a story because his story is just wild, man. And when we pull this back in at the very end, I want you guys to stick around for the whole podcast. And when we bring it back in towards the end, you guys are gonna see, why this episode of this podcast is just another measure of hope. Without a doubt. So Leon, man, tell us about yourself, man. Tell us who you are, man, where you're from.
Yeah, man. Leon Ford. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Born and raised. I still live here. And I'm a survivor of police brutality, man.
So tell me about that. And when you say survivor, and tell me about the incident, the police brutality that we're talking about.
Yeah, so when I was 19 years old, I was shot 5 times by a Pittsburgh police officer during a routine traffic stop. So I was pulled over for allegedly running a stop sign, provided my driver's license, registration, and car insurance. The officers ran my name. I didn't have any warrants or anything. Everything was legal. And then they just decided to type in L Ford in their MDT, which I'm sure hundreds of names probably popped up. And they just basically chose Lamont Ford and said I was Lamont Ford and accused me of lying about my identity. The officers used several racial slurs. They threatened me. For over, about almost 20 minutes on the side of this road. And, it got to a point where they decided to go hands-on and they tried to pull me out of the vehicle. I panicked and drove off. And one of the officers jumped inside of my vehicle and fired 5 shots into me, point-blank range, bro. I crashed. They, pulled me out of the car, slammed me on the ground. One of the officers knelt, next to my head, man, and he told me yo, I hope you fucking die, man, over and over again. And next thing you know, I just remember waking up, in the ICU. I was charged with several counts of reckless endangerment, aggravated assault, resisting arrest, escape. And that was the beginning of my journey, man.
Wow, that's deep. One of the things, because there's so much to unpack, and I know AJ always writes notes as well, but there's so much to unpack here. And one of the things I don't want to brush over is this initial contact you had. So you were stopped. How long would you say you were stopped for before this all, the shooting actually occurred?
Before the shooting, I believe it was maybe between 18 and 21 minutes. I don't know exactly how long.
And so they're questioning you about who you are, and then they ran you, and they obviously came back with a false ID, it sounds like. And then at that point, did they think you were lying about who you were saying you were and stuff at that point?
Yeah, they said I was lying about within the first maybe 5 minutes, maybe less than that. They said I was lying about being Lamont Ford.
So before we move forward, for any police officers listening to this, because we have a lot of police officers that listen to this, I want you guys to realize is before you guys start saying, oh, there's got to be more to the story, because, again, I'll throw the white elephant out there. There's always police officers like, there's got to be more to the story and this, and that. I'm going to tell you that I've done traffic stops before. I'll never forget this experience, and maybe I've mentioned it on another podcast. But I did a traffic stop, and on that traffic stop, I had pulled somebody over, and it was this guy and his wife, and they just so happened to be black. And I'm gonna use race because right now race is high, and so they so happened to be black, and so I ran him. And when I ran his name, he came back as I ran his name through dispatch. Let me say that. I ran his name through dispatch, and dispatch came back and told me, hey, the guy you're out with, he's wanted, armed and dangerous, and known as a violent felon out of Texas. So I'm like, oh, shoot. So I'm like, hey, before I even reapproached the vehicle, I called for my backing officer, and I'm like, hey, I'm just going to wait here. So a lot of time went by because we had another critical incident that was going on at the time. So I'm like, hey, I run him again. They're like, yep. Hey, this is, same guy, everything like that. So then I'm like, okay. So when I eventually I just said, I'm just going to go back up and talk to this dude again. So I'm like, hey, man, have you ever been arrested before in Texas or anything like that? He's like, no, I've never been arrested before in Texas, ever. And so initially, as a police officer, and I want people to understand, if you're not a police officer, is that we do deal with a lot of people who always lie to us. I mean, 95% of our time is spent dealing with, 5% of the people that lie to us. But we start seeing our lens starts to become, we start to judge everybody through that 5% when 95% of people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So initially, I'm like, nah, he's probably lying. Like, the dude's lying or whatever, but whatever. So he started giving me, so I start going through another series of questions, asking him, and this is where, if you're an officer out there, a new officer, this is what you need to do in order to make sure that we get people's identity correct, because it's just as important to, free innocent people as it is to take, the ones that we believe are a violation of a crime to jail. So I start going through these series of questions, asking him, and I'm like, I think he's not lying to me. And so I go back, I run him on my computer, and I'm like looking through it. I'm like, yeah, I'm just looking for all these any discrepancy I can find to make sure that I'm right with the right dude. So then I'm like, then I run them over dispatch again. They're like, oh shoot, like actually that's not the right dude you're talking to. So thank God I did my due diligence to go back, because again, what I had heard in my ears was this guy was wanted. He armed and dangerous, felon, all this other stuff out of Texas, gang related, all that other stuff. So in my mind, I was already starting to come up on my defense, but the guy's telling me he's not who he is. So people are going to lie to you, but just because you think they may lie to you, it doesn't rid the fact that you still need to do your due diligence, no matter what that is, to determine whether or not this guy's identity is right or wrong. And so I say that to say, man, that's unfortunate what happened in your situation, because it was later determined, rightfully so, that you weren't the guy that they alleged you to be, right, Leon?
Yeah, and to your point, man, while I was sitting there and they were questioning me about Lamont Ford, I told them, like, no, my name's Leon Ford. My birthday is 3/16/93. This is my address, and they were like, well, there's different addresses, because like I had an address listed, and like my insurance had a different address, and I literally told them every single address that I ever lived at, And another thing to add is that a lot of times when the news would report on my story, they would say the police officers thought that he was a known gang member named Lamont Ford, or a wanted man named Lamont Ford. During my trial, we found out that Lamont Ford didn't even have an active warrant, right? The judge never signed the warrant, right? So that was the thing, man. It's like there were some facts around even if I was Lamont Ford, if they should have been, pulling him over that night.
Man, so real quick, and then I'm going to get to AJ, because AJ, I know AJ has some questions too. But so prior to this experience with law enforcement, what was your experience? I mean, prior to this specific experience, what was your experiences with law enforcement before that?
Man, so I always, I worked at a body shop, and, I had different cars. So I at that point in time, I had 3 vehicles. I had a 1987 Monte Carlo SS, which I still have.
All day.
I had a 1971 Cutlass, which I sold, and I had a 2006 Infiniti G35, which
I had that one.
Yeah, that's the car I was driving that night. And so I got pulled over a lot, bro. Like, I mean, it depends on how much I was driving. Sometimes, like, there were weeks within the summer where I would be, pulled over like 3 to 4 times a week, bro. And I would just be stopped. I would show my driver's license, registration, car insurance. They would look at it, flash their light in my car, make sure they didn't smell marijuana or anything, and go about their business. So I was used to it, and it was something that, like, I kind of expected. Like, whenever I would drive, if I would make eye contact with a police officer or get that certain vibe, I would know, like, all right, I'm about to get pulled over. Unfortunately, like, the night that I was shot, I thought it was gonna be the same thing. I thought, like, yo, I don't have any drugs or weapons. I'm gonna just get pulled over. They're gonna see that my car doesn't smell like weed, and they're gonna go about their business. However, it was a different experience.
Man, go ahead, AJ.
Man, I mean, this is powerful, man. First off, thank you for joining us on this podcast, because you have a testimony that people need to hear, and it's powerful from both sides. And I hate to use the word sides here, but we'll just use it for what it is. It's powerful from the police side, because as Ryan said, like, I've been in the position before where I pull somebody over, or I've been talking to somebody, and, for whatever reason, like, red flags are coming up, or I'm like, you know what? He's lying about who he is, or she's lying about who she is. Fortunately, where I'm at, the department I work for, we have, like, all sorts of technology. We have, like, mobile fingerprint readers. We could put your thumb on and to tell us who you are instantly. We have a mugshot database, so we could type your name in. We could compare mugshots and whatnot. But just to kind of touch on, what you said, Ryan, my first year on the job, I pulled over a car. And as I'm pulling over the car, I'm looking through the back window, and they're playing hot potato with a gun, like, ain't my gun, right? And I'm like, oh, snap. So, I get out, and the gun is now sitting directly in the middle of the car, like on top of the middle console, and everybody's like leaning away from it, right? And I'm like, oh, here we go. So we pull the driver out. Everybody else is kind of at gunpoint, because, our rule is if there's one gun, there's another one. Plus, we don't want somebody to reach for it. So I'm talking to the guy in the back seat as I'm detaining the driver, and I'm like, hey, what's your name? And he's like, my name Lil Mark. And I'm like, hey,
what's your government name?
I'm like, what is your name? And he's like, no, my name Lil Mark. So I'm like, man, get out the car. So I get him out the car, handcuff him, sit him down. And man, what is good? Some technology right here.
What is that?
I don't know, my man Leon working some magic over there.
Did you do that, Leon?
Yeah. I just dropped the photo that.
I'm like, bro, I thought for sure, bro. I thought we got hacked,
was that the
bro.
Comparison?
Yeah, that's the comparison.
All right, I'm gonna check it here in a minute. I was actually getting there.
Bro, I thought we got hacked.
Short,
my bad.
I run my man Soch, and his government name was LIL-MARK, Lil Mark. That was his first name. And I was like, oh, man, I walked up. I apologized to dude. But, I had to detain him anyway. And that's my homeboy to this day. Like, when I see him, I chop it up with him. But I say that to say this is your story is unique from the aspect of police officers, because it's something we deal with a lot. And, we're allowed to remove people from cars and whatnot. But it's also unique from the civilian standpoint, because I can imagine how scared you were. I read an article before we hopped on here about your incident. And in there you said, like, I was scared. They were aggressive. He snatched my license from me. So I try to put myself in your shoes, right? So if I get pulled over, I'm used to being pulled over. I'm used to having interactions with police officers. The officers are already aggressive off rip. They run me. They're like, you're somebody else. Now I'm already like, this ain't going to go well. They start pulling and pushing. I understand your side as well. But I say that to ask this, is do you look like Lamont Ford?
I just sent the video. I just sent the photo.
Can you redo it? Can you redo that again?
Hold on, open conversation. Oh, here we go. No. Now we're the.
Hey, Leon, can you resend that? Because it popped up on my screen. I want to see if you can resend it, so we'll do it again.
Hold on, I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
Bro, I honestly thought when he sent that the first time, I thought we had got hacked, bro. I was like getting kind of nervous.
Oh, I done broke. Look, I don't know what I'm doing, y'all. I'm breaking stuff.
I started talking about my brother.
So here's the crazy. That's crazy, man. So the thing is for me, and this is my question for you is, and I don't know if somebody's asked you this before, maybe if there's anything you can go back and do, was there be anything that you can do differently, and what would you tell somebody that's being pulled over by police? What would you tell them to do in order to have a successful traffic stop with police?
Ooh, that is a tough question, bro. And I say that because I tried my best to de-escalate the situation, right, as a civilian. And even in my trial, bro, the officers testified that the entire time, right, the entire traffic stop, I was kind. The entire traffic stop, I was polite. The entire traffic stop, like there was not one moment where I was disrespectful, where they feared for their lives, bro. All the way up until I pulled off, bro. And so I don't know what, honestly, what if I could be completely honest, if I could relive that night over, I probably would have pulled off sooner, like before the other officer, like, because they called backup, and it was their backup that jumped into my car. I never seen them on the passenger side, so I probably would have pulled off sooner because, but I don't know what else I could have done. They were uh, they had their minds made up on what they wanted to do. And it kind of reminds me of the Rayshard case in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where it's like, bruh, like this guy, he's literally pleading with these officers, about like, yo, like I can walk home, right? And it just seems like these officers were just trying to provoke him, from my perspective, right? And during my traffic stop, bro, like they use racial slurs against me. They threatened me, and the whole time I'm like, bro, like I have a job, you know what I'm saying? Like this is my address, this is my birthday, this is my mom's name, like I try to give them everything, and I was polite. I never was aggressive with them. I never, argued back with them. The whole time it was yes, sir, no, sir. And that was like emasculating, bro. Like I felt like they were just stripping me of my manhood in that moment. And so it's like it's hard to even.
So let me ask you this: during the trial, did they ever say why the reason they actually used force? Did they say like they thought that you might have had a gun, or was there was, because I want to, but for the listeners that are asking, okay, there's got to be more. I want to be able to clear the air because I mean this is a transparent conversation. So, was there any mention during the trial of, hey, this is why I shot?
Yeah. So, the officer that shot me said he seen a bulge in my pocket, which he believed could have been a gun, and that's why he jumped in the car. But I sat there for over 20 minutes, and the officers that were flashing their lights inside of my car, they never made mention of a gun. And another thing is, he said he seen a bulge in my pocket. I had nothing in my pockets. Not a cell phone, not car keys. My pockets were completely empty.
So let's talk about the trial, because it's done, right? Like the trial is done, everything's okay. So during the trial, was there ever a gun found?
No gun found.
So there was never a gun found. And what was the outcome of the trial?
So my criminal trial, I was found not guilty of all the offenses, except for the stop sign.
Okay. So you put emphasis on criminal trial, and which makes me think that there was another one. I already know this, so just for the listener's sake, was there another trial that happened after?
Yes, there was a civil trial, and the jury was deadlocked.
Okay. So what was the outcome of that? Just for people who don't understand.
So the jury was deadlocked, and then a few months later, we ended up settling out of court.
Okay, so settled out of court. All right. Do you know Lamont Ford?
I actually met him after the fact.
Oh wow!
I met him after the fact, and actually met him at a football game where he just, he felt guilty. He felt like it was his fault that I was in a wheelchair. He could barely make eye contact with me.
Oh man!
And I had to reassure him, like, bro, it's not your fault. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not your fault. And he was like, bro, I want to help. I want to get involved. And unfortunately, he died about 2 months after that in a police chase.
Wow.
That's a twist. Wow.
Man,
so he was running from the police and crashed and died?
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. So,
go ahead.
Go ahead, AJ.
I lost my train of thought, man.
My bad, bro. My bad.
No, you good.
So one of the things which I find interesting, because you obviously see police interactions through a different scope than many people now. Rightfully so. I mean, you got shot by police. I would imagine it's hard for you to see police interactions from a different angle, or like the way me and AJ perceive it, because we obviously are the police officers. And so you said something interesting, which you may mention the Rashard Brooks one, which I have a different lens, and I want to talk about it because these are interesting conversations to have in order for one another to learn from each other. And so my perspective of the Rashard Brooks one was, it was a situation that the shooting itself was justified, but it could have been prevented initially. And the reason I say that is because I know I watched the whole video, and I saw that, the officers, it actually seemed like they were pretty cooperative with them. But one of the things that kind of sparked everything was when they went to go put handcuffs on him, he started fighting with them, and he actually disarmed him of the taser. And one of the things I've realized over the course of my career and in my experience is that, when you go to take somebody into custody and when they start fighting with you, okay, it's like the question becomes like, okay, why are they fighting with me? Is there's something else that they're trying to hide? So I know a lot of the comments I saw was, hey, they could have let him go with they could have just let him walk home or whatever it may be, which before law enforcement, I would have totally understood. Like, hey, yeah, like, man, let old boy walk home, let him do his thing. But what I've learned since being in law enforcement is when we allow somebody to walk home that we believe to be under the influence of alcohol, we are now liable if that guy gets in a car and goes and kills somebody or gets in a terrible accident, because they come back to me like, why did we not take this guy off the street when we had the opportunity to? So it's one of those things where when you come into a counter with somebody that is under the influence, it's like you kind of bought it at that point in time. Like you got to do something to intervene. At least maybe they could have called somebody and physically watched them drive off with them. But even again, let's say he goes home and then he goes out and kills somebody again. So that part I understood of it, but there was ways that they could have avoided, and that's why we had Henry Gracie on the last one, as far as the defensive tactics and learning how to utilize your hands and utilize your feet, so that way you don't allow somebody to get an advantage over you to where now you have to use deadly force. So the actual moment that the deadly force occurred, I can understand why an officer would have resorted to that, but we have to go back, and that's what we have to do when these police encounters, when we look at them, is like, could this have been avoided initially? And so, but again, going back to your situation, bro, it's different because, I mean, one, like I said, I've been in situations before where I've had the wrong guy, and I'm glad I do due diligence a lot. That's not the first time it ever happened to me, a story I gave to you. That's happened to me a few times. I do my due diligence to make sure I am talking to the person I believe that has the warrant or whatever it may be. The second thing is you've been shot. So one of the things I read, and you can tell me whether or not this is true or not, the same night that you were in the hospital fighting for your life was what your son was in the hospital being born, correct?
No, so my son was born about a month after I was shot in the same hospital. So I was recovering, and I believe I was on the 7th floor, and he was born on the 4th floor.
Wow. Same hospital.
So, same hospital, yeah. And so I was shot November 11th of 2012, and my son was born January 1st, 2013.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Wow. Man, this is good. This is a good dialogue, because I'm a huge advocate of complying. Like I'm a huge advocate of complying. And the reason I say that is a lot of uses of force that I've had to personally use, and a lot of videos I've seen online, normally stem from the party not complying, right? But this is a unique situation because you're saying I didn't feel like that was even an option. Like I was complying, I was saying it wasn't me, and then you're saying you had to flee because you were afraid for your safety at that point, right?
Absolutely.
What do you think the percentage of them using force on you would have been if you just would have been like, all right, I'm gonna get out the car, I'm gonna go ahead, whatever?
I probably would. I feel like they would have still beat me up.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, no, that's good, man. Because
But what else is crazy too is like, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, like he was complying, in this situation, and because again, you said something earlier, AJ, which kind of stood out to me is like, okay, I put myself in that situation.
yeah,
Like the words that you said, Leon, earlier was you panicked, which that's not far fetched from me. And maybe I'm just crazy to think, but that's not far fetched to me. If you've been pulled over, you're not the guy that they're alleging you to be. They reach in the car. It's not far fetched for me to say, hey, look, was the car? Did you ever put the car in park, or did you?
I was in park. And another thing that I don't want to like overlook is the fact that they used several racial slurs, bro.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
They will beat my black ass if I was lying about being Lamont Ford.
Oh, wow.
So it was that language.
Yeah, that shows the intent. I understand that.
And these were white cops. I just want everybody to.
These were white officers, and the same thing with Rashad's case. I mean, there is a racial lens, bro. If there was a black cop that night, or if there was a cop that understood how to communicate with him, bro, I felt violated just like listening to the way they were speaking to him.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's a racial lens, and when you grow up in a community where you have police officers treat you like you don't belong here, right? Like we have a different lens of like what we hear and how we hear things, right? So as a police officer, y'all may be looking at it like, oh, he didn't comply. I'm hearing, bro, they're trying to take this man's manhood, like. They are violating him. They don't respect him as a man, as a human being. Whereas Brother Ryan, you might have been like, "Come on, bro, listen." You know what I'm saying? Like, we can't just let you go.
Yeah, and you're so right on that, because I tell people there's a dialect that I understand. That, like, for example, here I always use this example. Like me and my wife, she always says I talk loud, always. And she'll be like, why you always talk so loud? But that's kind of how I grew up. Like in my house, we just talk loud to my sisters, and I'm very animated. I always use my hands. We use our hands a lot. So I understand the dialect when I'm dealing with people that are talking loud, using their hands, whereas some may interpret that as being aggressive or being, angry or defensive. In my mind, it was like, this dude's just getting animated and talking his hands. But at the same point, that brings up another good point which is why is it important to making sure that our police department is diverse in many ways, because there's certain dialects that you may not understand, you know what I mean? And you could perceive it a certain way, whereas I don't perceive it. And that's the difficulty with law enforcement in and of itself, is because every single officer's threat level, perception of threat is different just based on their upbringing. So I understand a lot of what you're saying for sure, because again, I see it at where I work is like, we handle situations differently just based on our upbringing and based on, how we were raised and what we've experienced through our childhood.
Right. And also to think about the community's level of threat, right? Like how we are perceiving white officers. Right. I mean, it's like, it's the same way. Like you said, like, you might talk with your hands or you might speak loudly, bro. When we interact with white police officers, their tone of voice, the way they interact with us, can be very oppressive,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like again, when I say I can see him being stripped of his manhood, right, just by how they were communicating with him, right? Like, I mean, because I felt that during my traffic stop, right? I had to prove that I was a good person. I felt like I was on trial. Like I had to say, yo, I work. I have a job. This is where I work. This is where I live. You know, this is where I went to school. Like, you know, like I had to prove to them that I was a good person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just for all the listeners out there, you know, he's absolutely right. You know, people ask me often, you know, like, AJ, how is it that, you know, you're so successful in this area working, or how is it that everyone knows you and you have these relationships? And it's because I speak that dialect, like I understand that dialect, but more importantly, I understand that culture because I come from that culture. And, you know, we talk about it all the time. Police officers, you know, often ask me what they can do to help them be more efficient, being proactive and even reactive, patrolling certain areas. And no matter what the area is, you have to understand the culture and be comfortable in that culture. The same thing we talked about when we had Gracie on is being confident and being comfortable. And they go hand in hand, right? Like if you're overconfident, but you're not comfortable, the chances of you using force is extremely high. And then if you're overly comfortable but not confident, the chances of you getting hurt is extremely high. So it has to be a balancing act, and they have to go hand in hand. And just to give you an example is everyone, I'm assuming a majority of listeners know my story. You know, I'm from the inner city. That's just where I'm comfortable. That's where I've been a majority of my life. That's where I work now. If you put me in a farm town, I am going to be so out of my element. I'm probably not going to know how to communicate efficiently, effectively, how to get my message across. People are probably going to look at me some sort of way, like, why is he talking like that? Is he kind of whatever? Just to give you an example, and I've done it, right? Like I've had to patrol rural areas in Central Ohio, and my communication skills haven't always matched that. But with that said, just because a lot of people listen to this podcast opposed to watching it, the results of your shooting, Leon, medically, you're in a wheelchair now, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So what was the result of you being shot 5 times? Are you sometimes in the wheelchair, or can you just?
I'm in a wheelchair, man. I use it every day. I'm T5 complete. Yeah.
Okay. So you're always in a wheelchair. But something that I really want our listeners to think about while they're listening to this podcast is we have a man on here who was shot by the police. Some people are going to some people are going to be like, well, he shouldn't have did whatever. Some people are going to be like, he shouldn't have got shot, right? All of that aside, we have a man here who was shot by the police 5 times, and he's willing to get on the podcast and willing to have this conversation. We talk so much about moving forward progress, building relationships, building that bridge. This is a step, right? Me and Ryan talked a little earlier about how powerful that is, that somebody can be shot and have pretty much the worst or the highest amount of force used on them by the police and still be willing to have a dialogue with them. This is how we move forward. This is how we take those steps in the right direction. So with that said, Leon, I hope I'm not jumping too far, Ryan.
Yeah, man, he over here stealing all the thunder and stuff. The hope. I'm like, man, we ain't got to the hope part yet.
My bad, brother. My bad. I know you got some stuff. So let's go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
No. So before we move any forward, Leon, to the officer that didn't grow up like me or AJ, what could they do in order to make, to connect with somebody that they may not understand the dialogue? Because you got to understand too, or our audience has to understand, is the reality, I know right now we've talked about, getting more, officers, getting more diverse officers into the profession, getting more people that look like the communities that they patrol. I get it. And those are all grandiose ideas. I get it. But that's not going to eliminate the fact that you may come in contact with somebody that doesn't understand where you grew up at. So what can an officer do if they're listening to this to say, hey, look, I'm not going to understand the dialect. I'm not going to understand, how, you guys, and I say like we as black people, because, I'm black, that, we use our hands to talk. How could they, empathize with you more or understand you more without coming across as being fake or without coming across as being crude, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. It takes, being intentional about getting to know people, right? Like, you can't just, put on your badge and patrol. You have to get to know the community, get to know the businesses, get to know the community organizations, get to know, the youth sports and you have to get to know the community, right? It's kind of like a teacher, right? If you have, a white teacher from rural America who graduates college and she then starts teaching in the inner city, she can't just show up as the teacher and not interact with the students and not build relationships with the students, right? Because these are the people that he is serving, right? And so as a police officer, these are communities that you're serving. You have to be intentional about building those relationships. It's so, so, so important. I know an officer in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I don't know. I do believe he grew up in this area, but he's a police officer. He's like he's the basketball coach, right? And he lives in the community that he serves, right? And I think it's so amazing. And he was actually one of the first police officers that I built a relationship with after my shooting, man. I was speaking at MIT, and I guess he had seen a flyer like on somewhere, and he just showed up, right? And he didn't have his uniform on. At the end of my speech, after everybody had asked questions, he stood up and he applauded me and he commended me, and he had so many good things to say about me. And he said, "By the way, I'm a police officer." And it just completely blew me away. And I got his information, and he invited me to come speak to some of his colleagues and a community program that they're a part of, man, at a studio. And it was just, it was an amazing experience, man. And I would never forget that. But his commitment to community, even though he's a white police officer, his commitment to community is like, it's interesting. I had a hard time seeing him as a police officer because I seen him as a human being, because he showed me his humility. And I think that is so important. Another story I'll leave you with is I remember doing an interview with a journalist in my hometown, Pittsburgh. And this is back like when I was in full swing of activism, and I had these T-shirts made that said "Cops, Criminals on Patrol," and like, so this journalist was asking me about my relationship with police officers, and I was like, "Well, I don't like police officers." After the interview, it was at the library, and I left the library, and this cop car pulled over, and the officer jumped down. He's like, "Yo, brother Leon, what's up?" And he ran over and he gave me a hug, and I gave him a hug, and he was asking about how my mom was doing and how my dad was doing. And I was talking to him, and the journalist was like, "Dude, I thought you said you didn't like police officers." And I was like, "No, this is Officer Quick. Like, this is like that." And those relationships are so important. I mean, when you are intentional about building relationships, people no longer see the badge, right? Like, they see like, "Oh, this is your job." But they see, Brother AJ, right? They see Brother Ryan first, because of the relationships, right? And again, even with and it's funny because the officer in Cambridge, his name is Officer Whitey. That's his last.
Officer White.
Officer Whitey.
Whitey. Oh, bro.
Hey, it's so funny, but that's his last name, and like I see him, like. I see him as a human being first, man, and I think that is so important. Man.
Well, you just said something, man. I want to highlight on, man. There's just so much, man. I can easily make this episode go 2 hours, but the fact of, right now we're dealing in a country where you got people on Instagram. I've had to, get rid of some folks that are like F12, F the cops, that are friends of mine, like, or even family. Because they're holding these signs, and I get it, and we talked about this before we got on the call today, is these people that are holding these signs, I get that they want change, I get that they want to see police do things differently, but a lot of them have never even had some bad experiences with police, and if they have, they didn't get shot 5 times by a police officer. Like, whether or not your situation was justified or not, and I bring it up because you are like AJ said, you're gonna have people that they're gonna see how they want to see it through their lens. But you got to remove that fact and realize that you were shot 5 times by police. If you came on this podcast and said I don't like police, I couldn't say nothing about it because you no longer can walk anymore from what you have. And man, shout out to you because you're so inspiring. We got to get that in a second. But I could understand why you would say something like that. But when you have somebody that's never really even experienced interactions with police and you say F12 and this and that, like, it's hard for me to wrap my head around is how can you say F12, F police, and you know me personally, you know me as a human being, you know me as Rye, you know me as Till. Just last night as I was working patrol, because like I said, I'm still a full-time police officer. Last night I seen a kid that went to my school that I was a school resource officer at, who has had some trouble with the law many times. As a matter of fact, we've used force on him before, and I was on that call where we used force. I saw him at the light. He didn't see me initially. He knew it was a black and white because he wasn't looking over. So I shined my light in his thing, and he looked over and he wrote it. I was like, "What up, fool?" And then so we pulled into the parking lot. But it was one of those. It was like we got out, man. I'm like, "Hey, man, what's going on?" We hugged each other, we're just wrapping it up, just talking. And his boys were in the car too. And by the end of the conversation, he was FaceTiming one of his other boys because I was asking about him. And as he's leaving, I'm like, "Hey, man, I love you, right?" It was like, I love you, right? And he was like, "Yeah, man, I know you love me, Officer Tillman. I appreciate it." But this is somebody that has had bad interactions with law enforcement, but I see him as a little bro before I see him as criminal. And that's where the hope is at, is to be able to see people as human beings. And it goes 2 ways. It goes for officers being able to see Leon as a human being that is just beyond. And one of the things that you said that is hurtful to me is that you had to prove that you were a good man. You shouldn't have to prove that you're a good man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not something for you to prove. And I get it, as officers, we deal with some people that do some bad things and they shouldn't be out doing what they're doing. I get it. I understand it because I do it every single day. But at the same time, I don't make somebody go out and have to prove to me that they're a good person. You know what I mean? And that's what's hard. So I want to transition into this hope because, bro, you give me so much hope that is unbelievable. And so last night I was doing my research. Try to act like Oprah, be all prepared when I do interviews and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I'm doing my research, and I saw you did a Q&A with a journalist or something like that. And one of the things that you said was just like jaw dropping to me. And this is where we find the hope. And I was just loving this. You're somebody, again, going back on the fact of you've been shot 5 times by police. Your life is forever different. Forever changed. And this is what you said. You said, "I encourage young people to run for office. I meet a lot of young people who are fed up with police officers and go to college and don't know what they want to do in life. Well, if you don't want to go work delivering furniture or working at Panera Bread, or you just don't like your job, then become a police officer. I think that's where activism meets mentorship, especially in our communities. I had a few football coaches growing up who were police officers, but I never viewed them as police officers because they were mentors in the community." Bro, the fact that you can say something like that, the fact that you can recognize that, you know what, instead of saying F12, instead of teaching my kids, we don't mess with them, you're saying, no, go become the change you want to see. And the reason that's so critical is because that's the message I've been preaching. If people want to see true activism, if people want to see things change, go out and become a police officer, or go into a place that's going to allow you to be that change from within. You know what I mean? Because it's cool to go out there. It's cool to protest. It's cool to, drop hashtags and stuff like that. But what are we actually doing? And I know that you have found some level of forgiveness in your heart for the simple fact that you can have this conversation with me and AJ. For the simple fact that when I met you last week, that we were able to sit across the stage from each other and hug, bro, and just like from day one, and not even you not judge me for being a police officer and me not judge you for being shot 5 times by police, and having that easy, catch-all, which police officers say, oh, there's got to be more to the story. Or he probably, or it's probably easy for someone to say, well, he probably was doing something he should have been doing. Man, screw all that. It doesn't come down to that. You have a man that was shot 5 times by police, and it sucks. And your life is forever altered behind that. So you had to find a level of forgiveness. And so that's why I just commend you, man, because I know how difficult your journey has been, and you're doing some phenomenal work. So talk about the work that you're doing in the communities now, where you get your hope from, and talk about your documentary, and then I'll let you take it over, AJ.
Cool. Well, so it's interesting. I was just using this book last night. I was talking to a friend who had a problem with another friend, and I was trying to mediate the situation. It's the 4 agreements, bro.
Nice. I'm gonna send that, text me that, because I'm gonna look that up.
I got you. So the 4 agreements, the first agreement is be impeccable with your word, right? Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or others. There's power in the tongue, right? The second agreement is don't take anything personally, right? What others do has nothing to do with you, right? It's a projection of their own reality. The third agreement is don't make assumptions, right? Ask questions, right? Ask questions to avoid misunderstandings, right? And the last is always do your best. And your best is going to change when you're healthy versus when you're sick, or when the circumstances are good versus bad. But as long as you do your best, you can avoid like feeling self-pity and different things like that. And so don't take things personally. But I've worked with police officers who absolutely believe that my shooting was justified. Right. And I don't take it personally. That's their perspective. And I can live with that. Right. Like,
wow.
Yeah. It's like, but how do we move forward? Right.
There you go.
And my will to move forward, my will to create a world where my son doesn't have to worry about, how should I react, to this tragedy. Right. I oftentimes people ask me like, yo, how are you preparing your son for the world? And I always say that, well, my parents told me everything and I did everything they told me, and it didn't work. Right? And so I'm not only preparing my son for the world, but I'm preparing the world for my son. And how do I do that? By building relationships with you, Ryan, or you, Anthony, right? And police officers, all over the country, right? And building relationships with, mayors and district attorneys and, state reps, right? And Congress, men and women. It's just important to build relationships and build a stronger sense of community, and so that's what I'm committed to. That's where the hope is at for me. Building relationships. Somebody's perspective, right? Officer Ryan, you said, you had a different perspective of the Richard shooting in Atlanta. That doesn't mean like now that I look at you any type of way, right? Because I don't take that personally, right? You have your perspective,
Exactly,
I have mine. Somewhere in there, there's a solution to prevent that from happening, right? And it's also interesting, as I work with police officers, I'm more interested in working with the police officers that who believe that my shooting was justified than police officers who's like, yo, this is messed up, right? I don't believe the solution to, these types of incidents only lies within the ones who we deem as good cops, right? I want to learn, like, even when I think about, racism in America, right? The antidote lies in the racist, not an anti-racist. Like, we have to go talk to a racist. Learn, what was your lived experience? How did you become this way? What are your triggers? And even when we think about the coronavirus, like, or any disease, we want to go to where it originated to find out, like how did this start, right? How can we combat it? And so the more open-minded we become, in regards to conversing with people who may have completely different perspectives or lived experiences as us, we can't assume that they know better, right? Can't assume. Bro, I had a conversation with a friend a few days ago about this, and they thought I was crazy. I was like, bro, I'm not in the streets, right? But I was raised by people who was in the streets. And I still can't fix my mind to snitch on nobody. Like, it's ingrained so deeply within me, right? And part of me holds on to that. And I don't even know why. Like, I don't know why I hold on to that, or why I would look at somebody different if I did find out that they was a snitch. And I'm doing all this work in the community.
But so before you move forward, you know why that's so crazy though, is because there's officers that were so deeply enriched in our profession that we always respond, and I say we because I'm a police officer, and even though I may not personally view it this way, but there's always officers out there that are like, well, there's got to be more to the story. There's got to be, and because we're so deeply enriched in what we believe to be, upholding this oath. So similarly to you, is like, you, for whatever reason, can't find in your heart to snitch on somebody, which you could talk to an officer and we'll give you a million reasons. I'll give you a million reasons right now to snitch on somebody. But the funny thing is that you said something that is so critical, is that we all have different perspectives and we all view things at a different lenses. So that's why I was able to tell you about my feelings about the Rashard Brooks one and not feel like it was going to be a hostile place, because that's how we learn from each other. And one of the reasons we're screwing up in society right now is the moment somebody says something that's in contrary to what you say, oh, my ears are closed. I don't want to hear nothing else. And how do we expect to grow if we can't listen to what the other person has to say and try to find a place to meet in the middle? Because that's where the solutions are found. And so that's why I love having these dialogues with you, Artie, from a few weeks ago, who was locked up and received a lifetime prison sentence, and I can go guest after guest. It's because we can find and have these open and honest, transparent conversations. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree, but what it means is that we can find, agreements with our disagreements, if that makes sense. So, AJ, go ahead, because I see you shaking your head, man, and this is deep, man. Right when I think Leon, we have one of the best podcasts, we have the next best episode.
Yeah. Man, Leon, you said some powerful stuff just now, man. And I'm sitting here taking notes like I always do, man. But you said, I'm not just preparing my son for the world. I'm preparing the world for my son. And then you went on to explain what you're doing. Like, you matched your why up with your actions, which is so important. Ryan, we talk about it all the time, especially with, ET. He's always, find your why.
Yep. I'm still in that line, by the way.
You're what?
I'm still in that line, by the way. It's going to be Mark Tillman.
Yeah. Nah, you're good, man. But Brad, I was fire, man. And I applaud you for that. But then you went on to something completely different that I never once thought about, that I do myself, that may help a lot of our listeners out and may help a lot of people out in general. So I just want to dissect it real quick. You said you were raised by people who were raised in the streets, and you can't find it in yourself to snitch on somebody. And I laugh because I'm like, okay, like I get it, right? Like I get it. Like I'm from this lifestyle. Like I completely see what you're saying. But then I put myself once again in those shoes. Like, okay, well, let me kind of see what he's talking about. A few New Years ago, my wife calls me and she's like, hey, she's like, you want to go to this New Year's party? And I'm like, no. Like off rip, I'm like, no, that don't even sound. I don't even need details. Like I don't want to go. Like I don't go out like that on New Year's. It's gonna be crowded. Drinks are gonna be overpriced. I don't even drink like that. So anyway, she's like, "You're gonna have some friends in town. Just come out." So I'm like, "All right." So I go out, end up having some drinks, and my wife calls it, all right, Aunt is coming out. Everyone who knows me before I was a police called me Aunt. And I'm like, whatever. So
they call me Aunt.
They call me Aunt. So if I'm at work on patrol, somebody's like, hey, what's up, Aunt? I'm always like, oh, wait, bro. Yeah. But I say that to say this. The next morning I wake up and, I admit it, I had too many drinks. So I'm like, man, let me look at some pictures. I'm looking at pictures, and all of the pictures I took after a certain time are me like pulling my bottom lip down, like to show a grill, or like mugging. and me and the wife like joke about it, and she's like, you just turned into like a completely different person. You have too many drinks. Like you're not aggressive by any means. You're just, your demeanor changes, like how you carry yourself changes. Like anytime there's a camera or like you are looking at somebody, you're like trying to show off your imaginary grill, because I had a grill growing up. Like back in the day, everybody had gold teeth. I had gold teeth, right? That's what you did. You showed them off. But the reason I share that story is it's ingrained in me. It's ingrained in me because that was the culture that I was raised in. For those of you who are watching right now, I'm talking with my hands because that's the culture that I was raised in. So to tie this back to what we talked about originally, is we have to have a certain amount of cultural competency, right? Like we have to understand the culture that we work in. And whether you believe the shooting was justified or not, it happened. We're having this dialogue, which is powerful within itself. But to avoid these shootings and to avoid these uses of force, we have to understand that that is what it is. My man flat out said, I felt like I had to prove I was a good guy. And I already know what some officers are going to say. Well, you were pulled over. We think you're somebody else. You do have to prove that you're a good guy. Look beyond that. We're in the situation now, and I'm just going to put it out there. It's going to be a very hard pill to swallow, but I just need you to trust in who I am. Hopefully you trust me enough to hear this. Is we're in the situation we're in now because a majority of minorities feel that way. We feel like we have to prove, we're not the angry black. We're not a thug, like I'm the good guy, right? And dissect that a little bit. What does that say about the world we live in? That we assume we're automatically looked at as the bad guy. That puts us in the situation we're in. So whether you think the shooting is justified or whether you think it's not justified, understand these 2 points. The first point is this, is minorities in this country feel like they can't trust the police, more so white police officers. My man Leon said it. Okay, so what do we do? What do we, keyword, what do we do? Now, okay, it's the community's problem. What do they do? No, it's a double-edged sword. What do? We have dialogues. We get out into the community. We get to know the community we're serving. Keyword there, serving, right? You're not there to arrest your way out of a problem. I get it. I go out there. I get guns. I get dopes. I get in car chases, foot chases, all of that. When I'm not doing that, I'm in the community. I'm building these relationships. Part 2 of this is I lost my train of thought, man. I'm going right now, man.
Well, I got something. Where are we at on time, Billy?
Hour 3.
So Leon, what could you tell the community? Because me and AJ, I always like to look at me and AJ being the voice for, like, being your voice for law enforcement. Like, that's how I always kind of look at it. So, because, like, we are able to have these dialogues, and then I can go back and tell my officers, hey, look, this is another way to look at it. But I look at somebody like you being the voice with the people that say F12 or, F cops and stuff like that. What could you tell them to make them like realize, like, so that way we can all move this pendulum forward together, you know what I mean, as opposed to being adversaries with each other.
Woo!
Mm.
it that's hard. It's kind of like going into like East Side High, right? And telling the students like, yo, you know, respect the teachers, right? They're good, right? These are good teachers. Be open minded. When, you know, for as long as they can remember, they've been feeling oppressed, right? And so I think that is more, you know, change in police culture to reflect, protect, and serve, right? Like when I see a police officer, bro, like growing up, I would see police officers and the first thing they said, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" And it's not, how can I serve you, right? I'm here to help you, right? It is like an assumption that I'm already guilty. And so until people can feel safe, right? Until people can feel like, you know, I can trust this officer, or I can trust this system, because there are, I mean, like you said, the young brother that, you know, you've had encounters with, he trusts you. So when he's saying fuck 12, he's not saying fuck Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. And I realize that. And
so, you know, I don't know how to get people to shift from saying fuck the system, bro, because the system is messed up. Right? And so I mean, I don't know what to say. I would say to those police officers who do believe in the system and who are a part of the system, to be intentional about building those relationships, so that when people are saying fuck 12, they're saying, you know, fuck 12, but Officer Ryan is cool, or Officer AJ is cool, because that is a start. When I woke up, bro, and after I got shot, bro, I hated white people. Period. Right? I hated white people. And I have a 6th grade teacher, Miss Shank, who I still have a relationship with to this day. She came to see me in the hospital, bro. And I'm like, damn, I hate white people, but I don't hate her.
I know, bruh.
Right? And that right there, right? That was, you know, the moment where it was like an awakening for me, right? That warmed my heart a little bit, right? And I use that story because if you can be that one officer that somebody believes is a good officer, even while they're holding that sign saying fuck 12 or fuck the system, you are doing your job, because you're opening up their heart, right? And they're thinking about, oh, but I'm not talking about that guy.
Yeah,
right?
And I think what's critical on that point is that, you know, what you said as far as like opening up a person's heart, like, because this was actually, we did this thing at my department a couple weeks ago, this department-wide debrief, where we talked about how everybody was feeling and emotional and everything. And I almost broke down actually, but I actually talked about growing up and, you know, having, you know, girlfriends who, you know, they couldn't tell their family who I was because I was black, or being called the N-word and all those other things. Like, so I had all this deep down and suppressed in me, which I didn't even realize. I didn't realize it was pain that I still had that I never really coped with. But then what I found out after the fact is there was white officers at my department that were saying that they went to predominantly black schools and they were picked on by all the black people. And what triggered in my mind is I got so wrapped up in my own emotions and my own experiences that I just assume that you've never experienced what I've gone through, and so you'll never be able to speak to my truth. But at the same time, I realize, like, if I keep saying what I've gone through, and in their mind this is what they've gone through, but there's no understanding, and the one commonality in this is what I realized is that we're all human beings, then we're never going to be able to move forward. And so I had to come to the realization and realize, like, look, because I've heard stories of white people that had somebody, a black guy, kill them. So just like you, is like, how are they supposed to view black people? Like you said, you hated white people. Like, that person could say, man, I hate black people, and be based on some trauma that really happened, and yet we look at it from the outside as like, man, that person's racist, without even realizing what went into it. So that's why I say there has to be a line where we all can come and say, you know what, I've experienced trauma, no doubt about it, but this is how we're going to move forward. So my message to police officers is, stop judging people based on the way they look. Stop judging a book based on its cover. You know what I mean? Stop making people prove to you that they are a good person. Just treat them like a human being. That's my message to them, so that way I can start training another generation of good officers out there to repair the broken system. But on the flip side of that is, that's why I asked you that question is, man, you are in a super powerful position, influential position, somebody who has gone down. You got the worst of the worst, absent of being dead by police, but have the influence to carry a message to those that have so much pain and hurt in their heart that they can't move beyond it. But you're living proof that you can move beyond it, because you can have dialogues with me and AJ. You can have dialogues with Officer Whitey. You can have dialogues with, you know, the reporter, and go and hug another dude, because you see the human behind them. And that's got to be the message that we push forward. That's got to be the message that we project to people, because you're saying, look, I have every reason why to hate these people, but yet I'm finding it to say, look, they're human beings, I'm gonna treat them as such, because ultimately, going back to my spiritual side, is that's my responsibility as a Christian brother, is to say, hey, look, you know what, I need to treat them as the way I want to be treated. Like Bishop Omar said it the other day, you know, God says love your neighbor, or love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, but I also want you to love your brother just as much as you will love yourself. That's our responsibility, and that doesn't have a race attached to it. So go ahead, AJ. I'm going to let you go say your thing, AJ, and then and Leon, if you could, man, once we finish this conversation, because I want you to end with what you had us recite at the event, the Heal America tour. So go ahead, AJ, and then we'll wrap up with you, Leon.
Cool. So you just reminded me of part two of my two-part thing here. The first was understanding how minorities feel in this country. Now that we understand that, we could move to part two, which is what we're doing now. And it's having a dialogue, having a conversation. So to the law enforcement officers, now listening to this, now that you understand how people in your community may feel, now is your opportunity to go out into the community and to get out of your car and to have a conversation. And it could be just this easy. Hey, how you doing today? I'm doing good. Hey, I was listening to a podcast, earlier yesterday, and one of the officers brought this up. Do you feel this way? If you do, what can I do to help? What can I do to help the community here? How can I be a part? Who's causing trouble in the neighborhood? Who are the good people in the community that I need to introduce myself to, that maybe I could help them. Maybe I could cut their lawn, or maybe I could, find some neighborhood kids to help break the leaves who are, looking to earn some extra money that you have. But I think the importance here is more so than anything, and I'm a patent this, so don't steal it, Ryan.
I'm stealing everything, bro.
is differences don't divide. That's what we have to understand here, is differences don't divide. We live in a world where you're either Republican or Democrat. And if you ain't where I'm at, we got beef. We live in a world where you're either a Crip or you're a Blood. And if you ain't from my side of town, and we got beef. We live in a world where you're white or you're black. And if you ain't in my world, then we got beef. We live in a world where you're a cop or you're a community member. And if you're not in my world, then we got beef. We need to understand, no matter what the circumstance is, differences don't have to divide. They don't. Point blank, period. And when we get that through our head, we'll understand, okay, I'm black and you're white. We don't have to be divided. We can have a conversation. We'll understand that, well, you're a Democrat and you're a Republican. Differences don't divide. You two could have a conversation and we could move forward. I'm a cop. You're not. We could have a dialogue and move forward. And the moment we understand that, listen, Ryan, bruh, we're getting there, bruh. Like the conversations that we have almost on a daily about changing the face of law enforcement. These dialogues are a huge step, a huge can of gasoline to throw on the fire to propel us in the direction that we need to be. And I say that excitingly, because that's a huge idea for me, and I feel like it's so powerful and so applicable in today's world that differences don't have to divide. So for my final thoughts, I just want you to ponder on that. Ponder on it, no matter who you are, if you're a female, male, gay, straight, Republican, Democrat, cop, firefighter, doctor, whatever. Differences do not have to divide us.
Hey, you guys are going to see my new video on Instagram today called Differences Don't Divide. Oh, man. It's good stuff.
Add to that, too, man. What I want, municipalities to stop doing, or, even universities, can we stop having these conversations labeled community police relations?
Mm-hmm.
Because that instantly says that the police, you're not a part of this community.
Yep. And Sir Robert Peel said it. He said police are members of the community, and the members of the community are the police. He said goes back.
Exactly. And so we have to have community conversation with all stakeholders of the community. And if the topic is going to be policing, then it's the community having a conversation on policing. It's not a police community conversation, right? Because differences don't divide.
Oh, he using it against you right there.
I love it. Differences don't divide.
Man,
I hate the term community policing. To me, there is no such thing as community policing. It's just being a decent human being that's a police officer.
That's a great point.
That is part of policing.
That's a great point.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So Billy, you have anything, man? I know you've been listening from the side, man. Anything? Any parting thoughts?
No, I don't have much to add, but awesome to listen to. And Leon, appreciate you coming on and being so forthright with us and just opening up.
So before we get off, so we're at this panel last Wednesday, and as we're there, it was crazy, man. I mean, the people that were there, and me and Leon could testify, man. All right, Leon could testify, so y'all don't think I'm lying. But Deion Sanders was there, Mark Cuban was there, so many different. Josh Norman was there from the Washington Redskins, Titus. I mean, I can go on and on about all these people that were in the building for the common purpose. I mean, and then it was even sombering because Martin Luther King's hearse was there. The real life hearse that drove him to the burial site. So it was very sombering. And so when we're having this discussion on this panel, we're going through like every panel member got to give their final thoughts on what they pledged to do or what they were going to do in order to make change. And so Leon said he rehearsed something, or he recited something that was just so powerful. And so if you don't mind, bro, could you do that for us, and we'll end on that note?
Absolutely. And do y'all mind repeating after me?
Not at all.
Let's do it.
All right. We must give up to go up.
We must give up to go up.
We must give up to grow up.
We must give up to grow up.
We must give up on the way up.
We must give up on the way up.
And give up even more to stay up.
And give up even more to stay up.
I cannot teach.
I cannot teach
what I do not know.
What I do not know.
I cannot lead.
I cannot lead.
Where I will not go.
Where I will not go.
I am. Because we are.
Because we are.
We are. Because I am.
Because I am.
I am my brother's keeper.
I am my brother's keeper.
I am my sister's keeper.
I am my sister's keeper.
I am destined for greatness.
I am destined for greatness.
Because I attract.
What I am.
In the African language, we say Ashe.
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 Ashe. Ashe.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Thanks, brothers. I appreciate y'all, man.
Hey, man,
Yes,
that
sir.
was phenomenal, man. And like I said, that really touched me, man. And like I said, we were gonna wrap this podcast up on the word hope, and hope is found in conversations like we're having now, and not just conversation, but relationships that
That's
we
it.
have now. I have a relationship with a brother that, most people would think or deem to be impossible. And bro, Leon, you blessed me, man. AJ, you blessed me. Billy, you blessed me. And I always say that, man, but I love every single one of you guys. And if you're a podcast listener to this, we love each and every one of you. So if you guys love this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. Please give us a 5-star review. And I do want to give you guys the announcement that in future episodes, there's a high likelihood that we may be having sponsors. Reason being is our podcast, which is a good problem to have. Our podcast has gained a lot of traction, so much so that we have a lot of people that are reaching out that want to sponsor the podcast. And so in order to keep the podcast running, in order to keep the podcast moving forward, we may start accepting sponsors. So I don't want you guys to feel some type of way if there's an ad inserted into our podcast. We're going to try to do it as, less evasive as we can. But at the same time, the ads we bring to you are going to be in products that we ourselves have either tried out or we endorse. And so I don't want you guys to feel like you guys are being bombarded with ads. So want to give you guys that heads up first before we actually start doing it, just so some change. And again, record number today, I'm going to just say the number. We hit 20,000 downloads this month on our podcast, which,
Yes, sir.
again, if you look up any type of podcast, if you have 10,000 downloads per month, you're in the top 5%. We hit 20,000 downloads this month.
And you guys
Yes.
who've been listening with us for a long time, I mean, us getting sponsors, that's just to help us keep doing this. We take the time away from our families. It just helps it just helps it make more sense for us, and you're growing with us. So that's just like that's just the next natural step for this podcast, is to take on sponsors to help us, and you're getting to witness us grow just from starting in some bedrooms, and it's been a really cool experience.
And we going, like, the sponsors we're bringing in, like Ryan said, like, we believe in the sponsors. We're not going to just accept whoever, but then we're going to try our best to hook y'all up as well. We're going to try our best to hook y'all up as well. The products, discounts, free shipping, whatever. We don't know what that looks like yet, but we're going to hook y'all up as well. Trust and believe that.
Yep, exactly. So, again, shout out to you guys. We wouldn't be able to move forward without you in that area. And when I say 20,000 downloads, that's not all time. I mean, all time, we're well above that. That's just 20,000 downloads in 1 month of this podcast. So, it's crazy. So, shout out. And it's only because we have great guests like Leon and Artie and Henner Gracie and all of you guys that listen to it. I mean, we wouldn't be anything without the people that listen to it. So thank you guys. When you listen to this podcast, have open ears, closed mouths. That's how we're going to move forward. So that way, whatever you guys hear, you can take it and then go out there and try to change wherever you're at for the better. So we love you guys, and we'll see y'all next week.
Peace.